Right, here we go. Part 2 in this 3-part series of quickfire questions. Let's just jump in. So, episode 63, Who Knew Shrinks Were Human Too, with Professor Linda Gask. So, Linda is an emerita professor of primary care psychiatry at the University of Manchester and a retired psychiatrist with over 30 years of experience working in the NHS. Now, in contrast to my conversation with Joanna Moncrief, the episode prior, Linda believes deeply in the merit of antidepressant medication based on her own sort of persistent and recurring struggles with depression, which is what this particular episode was all about. Okay, first one is, can you remember a time in your life when you felt the most alive?
Yes. When I spent a year living in the US. I went there to do a fellowship, and I think that was, maybe it was that I came alive again, but because I was over 40 when I did it, but I had an absolutely wonderful year and I did feel very alive.
Where was it, and what was it about the experience that made it that for you?
I was in Seattle, and it was a year away. It was a Harkness Fellowship. It was a year away from my work, but I was doing research again. I had freedom. I was in a new city. I was able to travel. I was able to go and explore all the things that were happening in the city, and it was absolutely wonderful. When my husband came to see me, he said I looked 10 years younger. So.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Oh, that's a big one. If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
I think that I would want to reverse global warming. That would be my thing.
Yeah, I suppose I'm going to have to give you that. Yeah. I was gonna say, should we go something that's a little less waving a magic wand? But when the question is if you could change one thing about the world, I suppose you have to have a magic wand, don't you? You can't just be. Well,
I can't change anything about the world, but I would change. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next one. Oh, it's a deep one. You see, some of these questions I'd feel uncomfortable answering. Oh, on which no, if you're uncomfortable, just say I'm not answering that one, and we'll move on. What are you most thankful for?
I think I'm most thankful that I've managed to reach this point in my life and I'm still going.
What do you mean by that? Exactly.
Because there were times in my life when I wasn't sure I would survive.
Right, okay.
I thought I might take my own life or something would happen. And I've reached this point. I got through my career. I had a great career. And I've reached this point and I'm happy.
That's a brilliant answer. Okay. What's the greatest risk you've ever taken?
Probably publishing my book.
Okay. Why was that a risk?
Because it's about being very personal and open. And I'm quite a shy person, really. And that was quite difficult. It was a risk. Coming out and saying, I'm going to be open to the world. I mean, my colleagues knew how things had been for me throughout my life, but coming out and being public is quite hard, and it was a big risk.
Has it paid off?
Yeah, it has been very positive.
Do you think that sort of, I know there's probably a balancing act there, but do you think that level of openness amongst mental health professionals would be more beneficial? It would be beneficial if more people did it. Not necessarily everybody spilling the guts, but just, I don't know, it sort of brings us back to that initial the initial question we had at the beginning about whether, on balance, is it better for you to have a therapist that is more human and open, or is it better to maintain that distance from it? But what do you think?
Well, I think in therapy, it's a different question. Right. I think in therapy, you are there for the other person. You're not there to share your own problems.
Right.
But I do think it would be better if more mental health professionals were generally more public about the fact that life's a lot harder than sometimes they might make it out to be when they're giving people advice on how to stay well.
Right. Okay, here we go. Oh, here's a good one. Right, if a genie could grant you 3 wishes right now, what would you wish for? And all the usual things apply. So what is it? You can't make someone fall in love with you. You can't bring someone back from the dead, and you can't wish for more wishes. And I want at least one completely selfish, indulgent wish, Linda.
Can I be thin?
If you want to be thin, that's one wish down.
That's my selfish, indulgent one.
Okay.
Number 2, I'd like to get the work done on my house. That would be marvelous.
Okay.
Supposed to be extending it, but it's not happening yet. So that would be wonderful. Number 3, I would love to have an apartment in Venice.
Linda, I have to admire the sort of how grounded those wishes are, because you could have got 2 of those wishes just by saying I want to be a millionaire, but if you get your apartment and your extension, you're happy, and I like that. It's very working class of you, that. Okay. I'm not sure if we've already maybe done this one, but it might be something from a different angle. What would you consider your greatest accomplishment so far?
My greatest accomplishment. Well, that's rather like the other one. I'd say my greatest accomplishment is staying alive. Really, that's been a big accomplishment. My career, staying in a marriage for 25 years. That's a great accomplishment.
Yeah, that's always an achievement.
Yeah.
Okay, right. With the last one, this is a good one. Well, the last one before my, I've got a couple that are sort of, I like to end every set of questions with sort of my favourites. So, what is the weirdest thing about you, Linda?
The weirdest thing? I'm always falling over.
Dyspraxic. I think that's the term for it, isn't it? Clumsy.
No, not sure. No, dyspraxic is where you can't use things and you don't know. I am unstable from the point of view of being spatially completely useless.
Right, okay.
And I fall over very easily. I have no sense of balance. I can't ride a bike. I don't know what happened, but I wasn't born with those capabilities. There've been numerous times when people have been out with me and they've looked around and I've disappeared and I've just fallen over.
Yeah, Linda's drunk again. Like, no, actually, just fell over.
Completely sober. Completely sober.
Right, okay. So these are my 3 favourites, and we've got 2 minutes left in the 10 minutes. So let's have a crack at these. But don't rush if you don't want to. So the first one is, what's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you?
Oh, what life advice have people given me?
Sometimes it's just like a quote that maybe resonates.
Getting enough sleep is very important.
That'll do. I tell you what, I'll put a quote in there for you, Linda. When I interviewed Professor Jason Ellis from Nottingham University on sleep, and he was saying that during his research they'd found that the quality of somebody's sleep is a better predictor of future mental health problems in the short term than any other factor that you can measure for. And his quote was, once sleep starts, I've modified it. I say it as, he didn't say this. This is my version of it. But once your sleep starts going to shit, something wicked this way comes. And that's stuck with me ever since. I've always made sleep a priority for myself as well. So I definitely agree with that.
I'm very poor at doing it, but I know every time things go wrong, I know that that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay. Outside of family and career, because they're the easy ones. So outside of family and career, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
I think traveling. I love traveling. And I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, some of it for work, but some of it not for work. And I've traveled on my own a lot, and that has been wonderful. One of my greatest pleasures.
And the final one, the big one, as always, and I always have to remind people to sort of answer this in the way that, whatever way feels right to you, because it's a bit of a cheesy question. What do you think is the key to happiness?
I don't think there is a key to happiness. I think happiness is something that comes and goes in life. Probably the most important thing is our relationship with other people. Not thinking that you can go off and work at it all by yourself. I think it has to do with how you relate to the world. And while you're getting on with other people doing things, then you'll experience some joyful moments. Or at least that's how it's been for me.
There we go. Linda Gask, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next one, episode 68, The Anxiety Epidemic, Professor Graham Davey. So Graham is Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of Sussex and a world-renowned expert in anxiety. He's the author of the Psychology Today blog, Why We Worry, and the author of the book which inspired this particular episode, which was The Anxiety Epidemic, The Causes of Our Modern Day Anxieties. Episode 68, fucking 68 episodes before we covered anxiety on a mental health podcast. I don't know how that happened. We covered porn addiction, magic mushrooms, and interviewed a paedophile before we got round to anxiety. Anyway, we got there in the end. Clearly, my interview with Tim Pitchell on procrastination didn't sink in. But anyway, here's Professor Graham Davey. If you could take the reins of power at the Department of Health, what policy would you implement to improve the mental well-being of the general public? And I always say, think dictatorially. Benevolent dictator, but there's no budget restrictions.
Yeah. Okay. One of the first things I'd do was increase money for psychological research of mental health. There are very few, and I've written about this very often. There are very few real outlets for funding for psychological research, as opposed to biological and neuroscience research into mental health. And I think that needs to be increased phenomenally before otherwise we won't get any kind of genuine understanding of the psychological factors that contribute to mental health problems. And the other one, of course, is something you yourself mentioned, Danny, earlier on, which is, when people want to get some talking therapy, it will often take ages.
Yeah. And
it often won't last long enough for them to feel genuinely recovered once it's over. So again, I think we need a lot of funding going into that. One of my pet issues at the moment is that we've managed to get what's now called IAPT, or improving access to psychological therapies, and that's been going for 10 years now. So it has improved access to talking therapies and CBT for many people. But it had to be funded in terms of economic success. It was funded on the basis that it would get more people back to work. Now, if you tried to fund cancer treatment or a heart disease treatment on that basis, it would be laughable. No one would actually go for that at all. But we had to do that with psychological therapies. We had to say how economically successful it would be in terms of the wealth of the country, which is crazy.
Yeah, two common answers there, Graham. It's very telling, I think. They keep coming up, those two. Okay, what negative experience has had the most positive effect on your life?
Oh, gosh. I think, things we've been talking about, I think the two periods in my life when I've had panic disorder have been quite insightful. It kind of stops you in your tracks for a while. And understanding that has been quite important to me. It was at a point when I was in my academic life wondering what it was I should be going on to do in terms of research and what I should teach. And it was one of those early bouts of panic disorder which really pushed me into psychology and particularly into the study of mental health and anxiety.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always said even though the anxiety for me when it got to its worst, it sort of nearly pushed me over the edge. I still can't bring myself to say that I wish I'd never been through it, which is strange, but I can't quite bring myself to say that. Okay, what's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you?
Well, the best. Well, the things I say to myself, for example, are don't do anything you might regret, but if you do, don't regret it. And I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had.
Okay, this might tie into that. What mistakes do you continue to make despite knowing better?
Well, I have, and this is on my website and on my Twitter account as well. It's people know that I like real ale, and even though I know that I probably drink more real ale than I should do, it's something that I continue to keep doing, and I certainly exceed the ever decreasing levels of units that I should be drinking a week.
Right, yeah. Okay. What is a harsh truth that you choose to ignore, but know you shouldn't?
Well, a harsh truth that I choose to ignore. Well, a harsh truth is one harsh truth is that since I became emeritus, I've retired from teaching, and that is something I miss quite a lot. And I tend to ignore that and say that, the partial retirement I have is wonderful, but I do miss a lot of that, and so I may be kidding myself.
Okay. What do you know to be true that most other people think, well, is bollocks?
Well, that's now past. But what I being a Leicester City supporter, the thing that I knew was always true was that Leicester City were going to win the Premiership, and they did, and everybody else thought that was bollocks.
Yeah, you know what, Graham, right? I'm not into football. My dad was mad on football, so it sort of put me off it. But even I, when Leicester won the Premier League, even I was even warmed the cockles of even my stone cold heart. That I've got to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, but it certainly did. It was never supposed to happen in my lifetime, but it did.
No, it was brilliant. Like I say, even for a non-sports fan. Okay, yeah. Final three, the big ones. What, if anything, keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Match of the day sometimes, and but mainly worrying. I think I'm again. If my mother was a pathological worrier. She's one of those what we call a born worrier. She would you only had to mention worrying or anxiety, and she'd come out with this phrase, "I'm a born worrier," which basically means don't try and stop me.
Yes.
That's what it means. You're not. No one is a born worrier. People become worriers, and they believe it's something they have to do to stop bad things happening. Well, that's what I still do. And my worry time, if anybody's interested, is usually between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's it. Lay in bed at night, in the darkness, plenty of silence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. That's same for me, that, Graham. Perfect time to start stressing about everything. Okay, outside of family and career, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
Ooh. I think I'm from a generation. I love my house, basically. I don't know whether that's outside of family or whatever. But I was of a generation who could afford to buy a house when I was in my 20s, and I've been in the house I've been in now for many, many years, and that's the thing that's given me a lot of joy. And it's also quite sad because I see my daughters who are around that similar age, mid-20s, nearly 30, who cannot do the same thing.
Yeah. No, sorry, Graham. I was going to elaborate on that, but we could go down a whole different, a whole nother rabbit hole with that. Okay, the final one, the biggest one. What do you think is the key to happiness?
The key to happiness, I think, is living a purposeful life. I think you have to have goals in your life. They have to be achievable goals, but some of them, not all of them, most of them have to be achievable goals that you can strive for, and you can feel some sense of achievement when you get there. But things that keep me going over the longer term are those kind of less practical dreams, like owning a yacht in the Mediterranean or something, I think sometimes those unachievable dreams are not unachievable, but those highly difficult to achieve dreams are the ones that keep you going in life. But again, a general sense of purpose in your life, I think, is always important.
Graham Davey, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. A pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Episode 70, How Corrupt is Academic Psychology by Dr. Tomasz Witkowski. Tomasz is a psychologist, skeptic, and science writer who specialises in debunking pseudoscience in the field of psychology, psychotherapy, and diagnostics. He's also the founder of the Polish Skeptics Club. Right, sort of already mentioned how much of an impact this guy had on me. He's a top 5 guest, top 5 influence. But his books, and I think I said this to him during the interview, his 2 books, Psychology Gone Wrong and Psychology Led Astray, those 2 books are still probably the best psychology books I've ever read. Tomasz Witkowski is he's like the boogeyman of psychology. While psychology as a discipline, and especially mental health, continues in its sort of hubristic attempt to build a Tower of Babel, while God seems to be sort of dragging his feet and tearing it down, Tomasz Witkowski is sort of chipping away at the foundations with a sledgehammer. That's the only way I can think of putting it. And again, he's another I dare you to read him, but I know you fucking won't author. But anyway, here he is. Okay, next one, Tom. If you could take the reins of power at the Department of Health, what policy would you implement to improve the mental well-being of the general public?
Okay, first of all, I would concentrate on prevention, because I think prevention is a key for mental health. and building resilience and psychological hardiness among children seems for me the most important tasks for contemporary society. Some countries try to do this, and the results are really, really promising. And another one would be education for general public. Education about mental health, about psychotherapy, about choosing psychotherapy, whether it's necessary or not. So prevention and education. And the third, last but not least, is the regulation of psychotherapy accordance with evidence-based research. That's all.
Yeah, that last one in particular. See, I'm a sort of a political conservative, Tom, and I'm one of these that I just don't believe the government do anything right. And for me, it's minimal government. Just get rid of them as much as possible. But yeah, that latter one, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. Okay, what negative experience has had the most positive effect on your life?
Again, there was no one negative experience. There were plenty of them, and all of them gave me priceless lessons. I think the only thing that I started to learn from them too late.
What do you mean by why too late? What do you mean by that?
I mean, I treated bad experiences. I treated when I was younger. I treated as something really bad for me, and now I treat them as a possibility, at least possibility to learn something about the world, about myself, about my reactions. So I try to take the best from such bad situations.
Okay. What's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you? And if you can't think of that one, I always give the alternative of what quote resonates with you the most.
I'm not a very religious person, but the Buddhist advice to experience impermanence is really valuable. To experience impermanence as often as it is possible. It gives you a proper perspective on the life, on things, and so on.
Do you mean that in a macro or a micro sense? So in the micro sense, it would be to sort of, I don't know, say you're out for having a meal with your family, to recognise that very soon, within the space of an hour or whatever, this meal, this experience is going to be over. So be in the moment and appreciate it. Or are we talking in a macro sense of always sort of having one eye on your mortality, on the end?
I'm in both.
Right.
I'm in both. It's an example. I prefer to visit ruins than good historical buildings, because when I visit ruin, I can contemplate this impermanence.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. Interesting. I've never thought of that before, but that's. Yeah, I like that. I'll do that next time. Yeah. Okay. What mistakes do you continue to make despite knowing better?
I know that relations with other people are very important in life, but quite often I behave as a loner.
Hey, Tom, a man after my own heart. I'm a complete lone wolf. I don't go out very often. I haven't got very many friends, and I quite like it. I mean, my favourite moments in life. No, I can't say that. I've got kids. I'm not just covering my back there. Genuinely, my moments with my kids, my family. But besides that, the moments I'm by myself, compared to maybe out socialising, I'll take solitude any day of the week. Give me a book, I'm happy.
Yeah.
What is a harsh truth you choose to ignore, but no, you shouldn't?
Truth about my intellectual and physical limits. I mean, I quite often, I always try to push myself beyond my limits, and quite often it's a wasting of time, and sometimes it's a harm.
Okay. This might be a bit of an easy one to answer, this one for you. What do you know to be true that most other people think is bollocks?
Well, I know that possessing and gathering, collecting things is not a key to happiness. I believe it. At the same time, when I observe people, even through my window, I think they don't believe in it. They collect things. They are happy because of their things.
Do you believe it to the extent? So I'm a believer in the saying that if you want to know what someone believes, don't listen to what they tell you. Listen to how observe how they behave. And so, do you actually practice what you preach on that? Do you live a sort of very ascetic life where you're very minimalist and that sort of thing?
Maybe there is a difference between ascetic and minimalist, because minimalistic way of life, which I like very much, means I don't collect unnecessary things, but I'm not ascetic in this way that I like to drink good wine, and this is a minimalistic. But I don't collect a full cellar of good old wines.
Right. Yeah.
This is a difference, and I'm not drinking water all my life. So this is. I'm not against things at all. I'm not against possessing anything, but possessing things which you don't use. The full wardrobe of clothes and many cars and changing furniture, and so it's completely useless. But
describing my girlfriend there, Tom. Okay, final three. What, if anything, keeps you up at night?
Well, every year, last few years, every year I spent 2 or 3 months a year on my boat on the sea. And when I'm on the boat, bad weather keeps me pretty up on the boat. But no such things on land. Maybe sometimes some difficult things with health of my parents, and it happens, but not as a habit, not such one stable thing.
Okay. Outside of family and career, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
Well, I took part in several extreme mountain and sailing expeditions. And these experiences are priceless, absolutely priceless.
Yes.
It was an expedition to Antarctica and in high mountains over 7,000 meters using ski, and it's really priceless.
Yeah, there's something. I'm not sure. I mean, I like going walking and stuff out in the hills. There's something. Again, especially when you're on your own, being out in nature. For me, there's something like I went on holiday recently and we hired a boat and went out into the sea and quite far out away from shore. And there's something so primally satisfying about being in the ocean, around the ocean, and yeah, if I ever manage to make enough money, I think buying myself a little boat that I can go out on by myself. I quite like that idea. Yeah. Okay, the final one, the big one. What do you think is the key to happiness?
Well, again, something about Hemingway. Hemingway said that people are looking for shortcuts to happiness. And he also said that there is no shortcuts. This is Hemingway's point of view. But I think there is a key to happiness, and it is low expectations.
What would be the distinction between having low expectations in a, well, I guess in a positive and a negative sense? Where do we define?
Never. You will never find this. A question about happiness is a tricky one, because there are so many kinds of happiness as people, probably. And we can't find, probably for you, happiness is something different what is for me and for other people. And one of the worst psychological research which I know are those about happiness. Because they ask people, are you happy? Are you happy? How are you happy? Sign on a scale from 1 to 10, you know? And it has nothing common with happiness.
Okay. Tomasz, Witkowski, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Right, next one. Episode 71, The Stigma Effect, Professor Patrick Corrigan. So Patrick is Distinguished Professor of Psychology at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago, where his research examines psychiatric disability and social disadvantage. He is also Principal Investigator of both the National Consortium for Stigma and Empowerment and the Chicago Health Disparities Center. Now, I remember enjoying this conversation because Patrick and I are on sort of complete opposite ends of the political spectrum, which is usually the case when it comes to psychology. But it sort of came to the fore in this episode, and I remember enjoying it precisely for that reason. It's probably this conversation which made me want to explore that side of psychology a bit more, the politics of it, provided I could find people actually willing to speak to me, which has certainly been a bit of a problem in the past. So I appreciated it all the more that Patrick was still willing to endure some pushback on that front. I think it made for quite an interesting dynamic between the two of us. Okay, this will be an interesting one. If you could take the reins of power at the Department of Health, what policy or policies would you implement to improve the mental well-being of the general public?
Give more services, have more services run by people with lived experience, by peers.
Okay, is that a common issue that's
taken off in the United States? So again, think a lot about what when we think about services for people with serious mental illness, we tend to focus on the meds and the idea you take your meds, your symptoms go away, and everything's fine. But what we really need to look at is, for lack of a better word, this idea of rehabilitation, because if your symptoms go away, you still have to learn how to go back to work or make it through school or live on your own or how to develop a relationship with a life partner. And coaches do that. The state of the art for work is job coaches, or a job coach comes to you at the store and says, how you doing today? And talks to the boss and goes through some time management stuff and does that every day. There's no reason why somebody with lived experience couldn't do that. You don't need a formal education to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think? I think the question that I was sort of trying to unravel there is that, do you think that mental health professionals and people like, politicians and counsellors and the like have got too much control of that sector?
Well, there's definitely, in all of medicine in the United States, with Obamacare, there's definitely an idea of pushing things to personalized medicine so that healthcare should be directed by the patient. And so in this case, traditionally, again, go back to the idea of what society expects of us. Society expects us to get these people out of their hair. But instead, what's good treatment is to ask these people, what do they want? And how do I help them get it? And a large part of that could be done by people who are in recovery from serious mental illness.
Yeah, I think it's something that's taken off here as well in both the therapy setting and in a lot of academia as well, is this idea of client-led services. So yeah,
a movement that's popular in the UK is recovery colleges. And recovery colleges, what matters is, the old school of hard knocks. What matters is what you can learn from your journey into recovery and how you can use that, not necessarily book learning and learning about psychopathology and neuroscience and the like. There's a role for that, but it's definitely lopsided. I mean, a large part of helping people get back to meeting their life goals, which is what we have as an ultimate outcome, is not in a pill. It's in the hard work of being with you as you go to work today and deal with the latest stress and not wigging out, and coming back tomorrow and doing the same thing and dealing with your coworkers and going home at night and wanting to cry and give up. That's a hard work that you need the support of somebody to help you with. And there's no reason why a peer couldn't do that. Mm. In fact, if anything, they probably have an advantage over you and I. Well, you're a peer. And, one of the things you talk about your own experience, and your own experience gives you authenticity. And then authenticity can tear down barriers pretty quickly.
Okay. Sorry, that's my problem with the quick fire questions part, is I start dragging us off on different tangents and stuff. So, okay. What negative experience has had the most positive effect on your life?
Oh, we talked about that. My own mental health challenges. For so many different reasons. Probably the big one we're talking about today is it's no longer them and us. It's us. I'm part of that group. In fact, when you look at mental illness is kind of a strange thing, because I would challenge any of your viewers to say they've not had experience with significant depression or anxiety. I don't mean meeting clinical diagnosis with it, but something we all relate to. And I think having that myself puts me in the group that I want to be in the group with and change the stigma of.
Yeah, I've got to say, Pat, one of the weird things for me coming out through all this was, I was really, really close to the edge, but I can't bring myself to ever say, I say this all the time, I can't bring myself to say that I wish it had never happened. For all the hell that it was, there was something about it that was worth it. And I haven't figured out exactly what that is yet, I've got to be honest, but I'm working on it. That's part of what this whole project is really. So, okay, what's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you? Or if you can't think of that, what's a quote that resonates with you the most?
I'll give you two. One is just do it.
Nike, yeah.
The other one is if you snooze, you lose.
If you snooze, you lose is our family motto in this house. I've always said if we had a coat of arms made for the Whittaker family, it would say you snooze, you lose in Latin, whatever that'd be. But it's really just an excuse for us to steal each other's goodies out the fridge and stuff. But I'm interested in just the just do it quote is, I think it's the fault of Nike's for sort of stripping the depth from it a little bit. And like I say, we're, trying not to go too deep into all these, but what does that mean to you really? Because obviously it doesn't just mean go buy a pair of trainers.
I know nobody will believe this, but I am a gray-haired square. And so I may have unconsciously discovered it, but I sort of discovered it on my own before I started hearing Nike use it. I guess Nike's used it for 20 years, so by no means am I saying they stole it, but I didn't lift it from them. It just makes sense to me. What makes sense to me is I can't tell you the number of people in life who are one step away from a Nobel Prize winning idea if they just sat down and wrote it down on paper. Or if they just sat down, they're one step away from getting an Oscar if they just sat down and acted. So just do it. Yeah. If you have to make mistakes in the process, so be it. But, all these great ideas will go nowhere if you don't do it.
Totally. Okay, what mistakes do you continue to make despite knowing better?
I'm not sure if it's a discrete mistake, but I still get angry. Angry is not particularly what puts me in the hospital, but angry is what will keep me up at night. And it's just getting too angry about stuff I shouldn't be too angry about. Actually, one of the things I like being older and gray is I do that a lot less.
Yeah, mellowed in your old age.
Yeah, it's like, well, I've been there, done that, but it still can hit me.
What's your Achilles heel on that, Pat?
What will particularly make me angry?
Yeah, what manages to get you no matter how much you try and make it not do?
I guess I would just. That's tough because I'm in the middle of one right now, and I guess I'd probably rather not share it online.
Okay, no problem. I respect that. Don't want to be having to get the lawyers involved. Okay, I love this question. What is a harsh truth you choose to ignore, but know you shouldn't?
So much for the rapid fire.
Sorry, Pat, did that not come across?
Oh, no, I heard you.
Oh.
I'm having a hard time coming up with an answer to it. I pass. Not because it's already disclosing, but it's too hard a question for me.
Okay, no problem. What do you know to be true that most other people think is bollocks?
Well, I do know is true is that people with disabilities are 95% like us and 5% not, and yet we focus on their problems. And so if one of the secrets to disclosure and one of the secrets to coming out is you realize what it means to be a whole person, then a lot of this stigma will go away.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer. Okay, final two. We've reached the end. Outside of family and career, because they're the easy ones, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
So I have to put this in perspective because I'm genetically Catholic. Patrick Corrigan is a nice Irish name. I went to Catholic grade school, high school, college. My kids went to Catholic school. My wife and I sort of felt like this is something, because we're genetic, it's part of our roots. And yet we really moved away from spiritual foundations, and an institutional church really gives us a hard time. And so 12 years ago, we discovered North Shore Unitarian Church. Part of it is Unitarianism, which I just think is an awesome philosophy because we believe in everything and nothing. We're the quintessential acceptance. And part of it is the community itself. I really like working, and I don't see retiring soon, but if I did, I would retire to be more active among them. They really live the philosophy of social justice and inclusion, and they don't get bogged down in a lot of dogma.
Okay, last but not least, the big one. What do you think is the key to happiness? Well, the key to my happiness is pursuing goals. Having something that motivates me to get me up out of bed every morning and do something. And I get really depressed and anxious. I get really depressed and anxious when something gets in the way of that. What's the best example of you taking your own advice on that one?
Well, I think one of the interesting experiences in my life is my wife, who was a public defender and attorney for 30 years, recently retired. And when she retired, I had this, wow, am I supposed to retire too? And I said, no. And so my work is as rich as ever. I've been doing stigma work for 20 years. We've morphed into this other area of looking at ethnic health disparities. And I think my research program is as rich as ever.
Okay, that's great. Professor Patrick Corrigan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Danny.
Right, okay. Steaming through these. Episode 74, Psychology's Liberal Echo Chamber, Professor Yoel Inbar. So Yoel is Assistant Professor of Psychology at the University of Toronto, whose research concerns the interplay between rational, deliberate analysis and intuitive emotional reactions, and how these two kinds of thinking influence people's beliefs, actions and choices. So this wasn't so much a revelatory episode as it was confirmatory for me anyway. The idea that there was like a liberal bias in psychology was kind of obvious to me anecdotally. So this episode just provided the data to confirm my suspicions, I guess. And remember, Yoel he's a liberal. So I wasn't just inviting like a paranoid conservative on to tell me what I wanted to hear. But what did stand out to me with this episode was how sort of engaging Yoel was to listen to. I thought he was sort of like really charismatic and had a natural gift for presenting his ideas in a really clear way. I see a sort of a young Steven Pinker in him. So I like to think at some point in the future when he blows up that I'll be able to boast that I was in there first, one of his early interviewers. Like one of these music snobs, like when everyone else is like, oh, have you heard of Yoel Inbar? I'll be like, bitch, I was on Yoel Inbar back when you were still shitting your nappy. Knock it off. What's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you?
Yeah, boy, I have such a terrible like autobiographical memory. I don't even remember like whoever gave me meaningful life advice.
It does trip people up a lot, this one. So the alternative I give is if you can't think of that one, what quote resonates with you the most?
Yeah, boy, I also completely forget quotes. All right, no.
You're not drinking now, are you, Yoel?
I start early, man. The mimosa's at 9, and then you just kind of ramp up throughout the day. Okay. So I actually have one that I like that pertains to science from Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, about fooling yourself. But basically, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said that you are the easiest person to fool. It's very easy for you to fool yourself about the validity of your results, right? And to me, that quote is about scrutiny and skepticism and holding yourself like in your own data to like the highest possible standard because you're so motivated to see things more favorably than they actually should be seen.
Yeah. Well, perfect quote in line with today's topic, that one.
All right.
Okay, if you could take the reins of power at the Department of Health, what policy would you implement to improve the mental well-being of the general public?
Oh, that's easy. Ban all social media.
Yeah? What's your justification for that?
It makes people miserable. It's like amps up the worst of social comparison, having to be in constant contact. We don't see it so much because we're older. You're probably around my age. I'm 40. Right. But like, if you look at like how young girls are interacting with social media, like they literally can't put it down. And you have to be constantly engaged, constantly interacting, which is obviously what these firms want, right? That's how they make money. But like social life for these kids is moved online in a way that's incredibly unhealthy. Even if you're doing well, like if you're high status, you have to be constantly on. If you're low status, you can be constantly bullied, right? At school, you get picked on. Used to be you would go home and at least that would be a respite. And now the bullying can like proceed 24/7 online. So I think we're going to look back and we're going to be like, this was a horribly misguided experiment and we should not have done it.
Yeah, I do want to get around to doing an episode on that. For me, it's like you say, I'm your generation, I'm 36 and I just... I don't get it, and I don't mean that in a sort of old fuddy-duddy or a Luddite way, but it just doesn't connect with me. When I pick up and start interacting with it, it doesn't do anything for me. I can sort of take it or leave it, but like you say, this addiction to it with the younger generation, it's crazy. I'm glad I'm glad it didn't come around for me, that. Okay, what negative experience has had the most positive effect on your life?
Oh boy, that's easy. I was seriously ill in my late 20s. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is like a blood cancer.
Yeah.
And that was definitely not a positive experience, but it has had some very positive effects. I would say in terms of putting things in perspective of what's important and what's not.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on this podcast. The idea of sort of facing up to your mortality and how it puts everything in perspective. Well, actually quickly now is, I've always wondered whether the experience of sort of voluntarily trying to face mortality, I'm not convinced that can ever live up to actually facing it. And was that something you ever considered before you got ill? And
No, not at all. No, it sort of draws your attention to that in a way that you can't get away from. And, you know, in your 20s, I think you're naturally not really thinking about like, I'm going to die sometime. I mean, you obviously know it abstractly, but it doesn't, it doesn't really impinge on you emotionally. And then this happens and you're like, shit, this is real, you know? So it's an experience that like everybody's going to get there.
Yeah.
It's just like you get there a little earlier, I guess, having this happen to you at a younger age.
Yeah, wow. And I guess not, you know, everyone's going to get there, but not everyone's going to get that second chance as well. That's quite a unique experience in itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What mistakes do you continue to make despite knowing better?
I go on Twitter more than I should on a daily basis.
And make yourself miserable.
Exactly.
I love this question. What's a harsh truth you choose to ignore, but know you shouldn't?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's great. I think there are a lot of harsh truths around the methods, like statistical methods that we're using in social psychology, that we're making inferences that are basically unwarranted. And at the same time, we as a field haven't really caught on to that. So as a researcher, you're kind of in a difficult place where like reviewers might ask you to do, you know, this statistical technique to establish something. And you're like, you know, that like, you know, you can't make really strong inferences from those results, but that's what they want. And that's how you're supposed to publish papers. And so it's like, well, what do you do? Like, you can't just decide, you can't go off on your own and decide that the field standards suck. But at the same time in your heart, you're like, ah, these methodologists are onto something though. Like, so that's disconcerting.
Yeah. Okay. What, if anything, keeps you up at night?
Oh, just the boring shit, teaching, you know, I'm just finishing my teaching semester now. I wake up at, 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh crap. I was supposed to like get that in. Did I forget? Oh man, what am I going to say in today's lecture? Is that prepped right? I don't know. That sort of crap. Nothing interesting.
Well, like you say, I guess that puts it in perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like it's, after having the experience you've had in your late 20s, I don't suppose there's much, you can only sort of worry about the more mundane things now because you've sort of faced up to the biggest worry.
Oh yeah, that stuff's off the table.
Yeah.
Luckily, worry sort of expands to fill the available space, right? So I still find plenty of things to...
Yeah. Oh, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Okay, final three. What do you know to be true that most other people think is bollocks?
Whew. That's... I like that. What do I know to be true that most other people think is bollocks? Sorry, Alexa's getting chatty in the background. So this has been going around on Twitter, of course. The idea that our minds evolved, so that our beliefs and preferences and abilities are the product in part of millions of years of evolution, something that a lot of people find to be really unintuitive or just wrong or misguided, and I think is 100% correct. And that actually like comes from across the political spectrum, where on the left, there's this sort of blank slateism, and on the right, obviously, there's kind of in some quarters an unwillingness to acknowledge evolution at all. And so I think this is something that, like, also because people are just kind of intuitive dualists, it feels very unnatural to people, and they don't like it. And I think it's 100% true.
Okay. I also like that the word bollocks said in an American accent set Alexa off in the background. Okay. Outside of family and career, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
Oh, that's a nice one too. Working out on a regular basis. No question. Are
we talking weights, running? What's your...
So yeah, I do two things. I do weights, so typically like free weights, just like the big lifts, and then I do climbing, like at a climbing gym.
Okay.
Yeah, and so those are my two like things that they're both kind of expensive and time consuming. This is definitely like a luxury good for upper middle class people, but they're so rewarding, both in terms of like, it's rewarding to progress. And both of those things are like where you can like measurably progress, right? You're like, oh, I can now do these routes that I couldn't do before, or now I can lift more than I could before. And also you just feel better. Like if I don't go in a week, I feel like shit.
Yeah. No, it was I've just done a New Year's episode with somebody, New Year's resolutions, and just realised that, so I used to love doing weights, did weights all the time, and then 2 years ago we had our second child, so we had to get rid of the gym in the house, and in 2 years I've put on 45 pounds, so I desperately need to get back on it. Everything's starting to jiggle. Okay, finally, the big one. What do you think is the key to happiness?
Well, this is like terrible, like as advice, because it's like you can't really like talk yourself into this, but like realize that we're all going to die soon and that nothing is that big a deal.
So
but
again,
I feel like
face your mortality.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's something where you can be like, okay, I'm going to decide to believe that now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying before. Is that I've always sort of had one eye on death. I've always been a bit morbid like that. But even if I've pulled it in a bit more from it being completely abstract the way it is for most people, it's not the same way that you faced it. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, I'm not sure that you can manufacture that. But obviously, we can't go as far to say, what's the key to happiness? Actually, nearly dying. So
right. You don't really want to recommend that to folks.
Yeah, so we'll just stick to contemplating it really, vigorously. Let's just do that.
There you go. I think you can get most of the way there. So like if you read, Marcus Aurelius, he talks a lot. That was like part of Stoic practice, right? Was like contemplating your mortality, thinking about like what's going to literally happen to you once you die. So just spend a few minutes a day doing that.
That is a great note to end on.
Wonderful.
Yoel, Inbar, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Right, there we go. That's part 2 over and done with. Just one more left to go. So again, I'll see you geeks in a couple of days.